Alright, so I'll start and we'll see who else comes in. Just an announcement. I got an email from someone in the library who works with literacy and not directly with the writing studio, but I thought I would take the opportunity to ask her to come into the class to speak, not today, but on October 13th. Oops, where's my thing here? Just right here. This person, I forget her last name, October 13. So for like the first, I think, hour and 15 minutes or something, she'll be giving a talk about literacy, how to use the library, but she'll also be, I think she will also be talking about how to write papers and stuff like that, because I told her that you have a paper due at the end of August, or the end of October, so don't get, I'm just saying. So if you wanted to bring your work so she could look at it, or have it on your computer so she could look at it and maybe give some advice or whatever, tell you what they have available, like at the writing studio, then you could do that. So just to let you know, October 13th. So just make a note of it. Is there anything else? I don't think so. So I will launch into the next section, which is how is religion studied? As I'm going through it, I will try to make connections to questions of violence. We haven't gotten to violence yet. We will get to what is violence. But I'll try to continue to make connections to the question of violence, even in how religion is studied. So let's get to that. I have a PowerPoint here. The PowerPoint is available on Blackboard, so you can download it, print it out, use it to take notes on, whatever. Take a look at it. Oh, yes, before I also forget, remember that tomorrow is quiz number 2. So tomorrow is Friday, quiz number 2. I've already finished it, so it's 6 p.m. Friday evening. Quiz number 2 will be available, and you will have until the week. The next Friday, plus 15 minutes into Saturday, yes, I know, but basically from Friday till Friday to get it finished, okay? And it's covering all the material that we've been talking about and some of the stuff that I'll talk about tonight. All right, let's go, Mr. Dunn. How is religion studied? If there is such a thing as religion, then could it not, if there is such a thing as religion, and I think that there is, can it not be evaluated? Can it not be studied like any other human phenomenon? I mean, if it does exist, if there is data available, evidence available of people believing in spiritual beings and having all sorts of practices and ways of life, that practices they use and ways of living in relation to their belief in those spiritual beings, can it be studied? I mean, if people are doing these things, you can see them, you can observe them, then can it not be evaluated? Can you not study them? I say yes, it can, and it is, even if religious studies professors, some of them, not all of them, but enough that you will encounter this point of view amongst, as I told you, amongst religious studies professors. Some of them will tell you there is no definition for religion. Religion is, an artificial creation that was made in the West back in like the 1800s. Okay, fine, we've talked about that. But they know they can still study it because they have courses on it. They have whole departments of religious studies, and they call themselves religious studies. They're studying religion. So yes, it exists, I think, and it can be studied because it is, which just goes to show that I think Jonathan Z. Smith is wrong, that there is in fact data for religion. Otherwise, there would be nothing to study. I mean, if there's no religious data, if it's all just politics, or it's all just something ethnic practices or national practices, then what's there to study called religion if it's not really there? But no, there is data because the proof is in the pudding, as the saying goes. If you can study it, then there's something there to study. So I think Jonathan C. Smith is wrong that there's no data for religion. So what is religious studies? Here's a definition of religious studies. Religious studies, now I gotta move myself out of the way, minimize, there we go. Religious studies is what? The academic field. It is an academic enterprise. It is an academic project. So it's a field in academia which studies in a descriptive, non-judgmental way the religious beliefs and practices of human beings. Or we could just say religion, which studies religion. Two things in this, well, three things, as I already mentioned. It is an academic field. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to be religious, spiritual, a God believer, a spirit believer in any way to study religion. It could be something that fascinates you, something that you're interested in. It's a field of study. And it is done in a particular context. It's done in the context of a college here, or a university, as Fairleigh Dickinson is a university. And it's done from a certain perspective, that kind of scholarly academic perspective of talking about it, writing about it, thinking about it, coming up with theories about it, stuff like that. Real world stuff. You know what I'm saying? Not staying in your head. Well, that's anyways. The second thing would be that it is descriptive. Religious studies is describing something. So it's not necessarily participatory. A person may be religious and participate in a religion, but that's not necessary to be a religious studies scholar. Participating. You don't have to be participatory. And really, religious studies should not be participatory. You're more of an observer. You might go to the temple, say a Hindu temple, and observe the worship service or whatever service is going on. And maybe even to some extent a person might participate if something were offered, like they offered to put some sacred paste or powder on your forehead. A religious studies scholar is okay. I'm here to I'll accept that. But they're not really there as a participant in the sense. They're not there to worship the god or participate in whatever the ceremony is. You're there to describe it, to experience it, yes, but to describe what you're experiencing. I see them doing this. They seem to believe this. Their actions show me that they believe X, okay? And then you would write about it or talk about it. And you wouldn't necessarily talk about how it affected you spiritually. That would be different. Because this leads into the third point, which is non-judgmentalism. That you're not there to judge what's going on. You're not there to say, well, they did this at this religious ceremony that I went to, and I think that's wrong. Or it's evil, or it's bad, or it's untruthful. You're supposed to be non-judgmental, even if you have beliefs. I mean, a religious studies scholar might be an atheist, might not believe that there's any spiritual reality, might believe that the whole world is just matter and physical stuff. But if she goes to a religious ceremony, she acknowledges the fact that these people believe that there is a spiritual reality. These people believe that there is a God, that maybe they're saying prayers to this God. Do I believe, I'm speaking hypothetically, not really. I mean, if I, as an atheist, religious studies scholar, go, I respect that. I don't say, hey, you know what, everybody? You're all wrong! You're talking to yourselves! That's not the point. That's not the point. You're not there to judge their belief system, but to describe it and to hopefully gain some insight into what it means for these people, even if you don't believe in it. So it's academic, it's descriptive, it's non-judgmental, And of course, that doesn't mean at the end of the day that, as I said, that a religious studies scholar cannot be a believer in something. A religious studies scholar could be a Catholic and go to Mass every Sunday, but still have to make that kind of separation in a way between the academic field that he or she practices and their own religious beliefs and practices. That person may believe that going to a Hindu, again, let's stay with our example of, say, a practicing Catholic goes to a Hindu temple and, of course, does not believe in all the gods and goddesses and spirits that are there because they have statues of them all over the place. The Catholic might believe that's idolatrous, that's even wrong to worship physical objects as if they were God. But again, that's not why the person is there. The person is there in his or her role as a religious studies scholar who is investigating, trying to gain insight. Okay. I'll give you a brief history of where religious studies came from. You already know some of this because we had to talk about it when I talked about is there such a thing as religion? And we read that quotation from Jonathan Zettel Smith. Whoops, there we go. Religious studies, this man, Friedrich Max Müller, yes, you have the two dots over the U because it is not an U, it's not Müller, it's Müller. Okay, that's why they're there, he's German. He is considered the father of religious studies, and you can see when he lived from 1823 until 1900. So look at his dates. You can see that the academic study of religion is relatively new. It's a new discipline in study. It's only since about the 1800s that there is a specific field of academic study devoted to religion. Before that, no. I mean, did people talk about religion? Yes. Did people write about religion or theology, as they sometimes called it? Yes. Often. We know this from our reading from Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas was a man who lived in the 13th century, the 1200s AD, and he wrote a whole section on what is religion and one of his major works that we read from. So people have been talking about religion for a long, long time, but in the universities, and I should say in universities, religion was a part of your studies. Usually you studied religion and theology as part of everything else that you studied. So religion was there. But as an academic discipline, kind of like biology, hello miss, kind of like biology or history or physics, not really. That wasn't in people's minds. That wasn't how religion was discussed. So it was only in the modern period, very modern period, that people started to really discuss religion as an academic subject like any other subject that might be offered in a university, like medicine or law. Okay. Before I forget, Ms. Randazzo, can I see you at the break, please? Okay, thank you. Okay. Whoops. Here. Ms. Philistine? Yeah. Philistine, okay. Just keep this out. Well, I'll lose it. I can't even remember where I'm putting my. Just put them in here so I don't forget. I want to naturally reach for them. And I'm just giving a brief history of religious studies. It started mainly in the 1800s, and it started in Europe and America. So Europe and America. I believe I put a map on this PowerPoint. All the way at the end, I believe. Let's see if I did that. Yep, I did. Well, now I made a mistake. A little boo-boo. Just go back. Actually, I won't do that. I'll go right to this. There we go. Because I sometimes talk about places countries and places in the world, and there are no maps in the room. So, I mean, I can't assume that everyone knows where places are in the world. So, a lot of times I'll place a map somewhere on my PowerPoint, so if I need to, I can point to places. So this is a map of our world, the various continents, wondering where Europe and America are. Right circle it on the board, but I don't want to circle it on the point. So Europe is here. This is Europe. And over here is America. And in America, of course, Canada, which is part of North America. And Canada also has connections to Europe because Canada, at the time, at least in the 1800s, was part of the British Empire. So it was almost like, wasn't exactly, well, it was pretty much like a colony of the United Kingdom. That's correct to say. So Great Britain or the United Kingdom, it changes names. I forget which dates that. Sometimes it's Great Britain, sometimes it's the United Kingdom. But so Canada also has that connection to Europe, and then of course there's the United States. So as an academic field, it arose early, the 1800s. It arose in basically what we call the West, which is Western Europe and North America. One could also point out that this is largely a Christian context religiously. Europe and North America were by far majority Christian areas of the world, so it's coming from that background, that religious background. And we have this gentleman called Friedrich Max Mueller. There you are, 1823 to 1900, who is considered the father of religious studies. I won't give you his whole history, but I'll just tell you something about him. He was born in the German, what's called the German Confederation. There was no Germany as the nation we know today. I mean, that part of Europe was still in the 1800s broken up into all sorts of little principalities, places ruled by princes, by dukes. Some of them were independent city-states, so it was a mess. Politically, it was a mixture of a whole bunch of things. And he was part of an area, a group of areas that we would call Germany today, that kind of came together and became confederated, related to each other in, I don't know if in their government, but maybe in their economies and their relationships. So it's called the German Confederation. Right here. But he was German ethnically, spoke German, was ethnically German, so we'll go with that. We could say Germany for shorthand. And he was a scholar, especially he was a scholar of languages, which is called a linguist. Linguist, this word linguist just comes from the Latin word lingua, which means tongue. And sometimes this word lingua means tongue. And, we say that in English sometimes. If a person can speak many tongues, you understand that, okay, that person can speak many languages. We use the word tongue, even though it's a physical thing in our bodies, we use it in a kind of conceptual way to speak of languages. Right? So he was a linguist. He was a scholar of languages. And at some time he emigrated. He went from the Germany, let's just say Germany, or the German Confederation, I guess, to Britain. And he taught at Oxford. He taught at the great University of Oxford. I believe it's the oldest Western university. So he traveled from the German Confederation to Britain, where he taught at Oxford. And I get to that in a moment. And he became a pioneer in what's called the comparative study of religion. By comparative study, it means that you take 2 or even 3 different religions and you take a belief from them that seems to be similar and you compare it. Okay, so let's say the idea of God, and you might take Judaism and say Hinduism, and what's the third one we could throw in? I guess Islam. We'll throw in Islam. So you got Judaism, Hinduism, and Islam, and then as a comparative religionist would say, okay, how do each of these 3 religions talk about God? What do they believe about God? What is God for them? How do they relate to God? How do they worship that God if they do? Do they have one God or many gods? All sorts of questions that will be asked, and you compare. Now, some religious studies scholars, I mean, this is what he was doing, or at least this is, a field of study that he helped pioneer. Nowadays, there are religious studies scholars who would not like to do that because they believe that each religion is what they call incommensurable. Basically means that everything is unique and really cannot be compared to anything else. They're incommensurate. Incommensurate, or they are incommensurate. Whoops. What do I want to do? Where's my? Oh, here it is. That there. Incommensurable, unable to be compared. Incommensurate is just a fancy word for saying to compare something. They're not comparable. Okay, in means not. Okay, commensurate has the way is just a fancy way of saying that they're comparable. They're comparable. Okay, they're almost equal to each other, and they're not. A lot of religious studies scholars would say that religions are really unique, and so you can't. It's not appropriate to try to compare them. That doesn't mean that still doesn't happen. Okay, but maybe not in the way that Max Mueller was doing it, by assuming that all these things were religion, and because they were all religion and came under the umbrella concept of religion, therefore you could just pick from these different things, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, and since they were all religion, they were all like the same, and so you could compare them. And now modern religious studies scholars would say, no, yes, you can look at those 3 religions, maybe compare them, but you have to remember they're unique and very different from each other. And they might use the word God and understand the word God in ways that are very, very different from each other. So that's what he's a pioneer in. And so he's called the father of religious studies. Because, and I'll repeat this later, but I'll mention it now, why is he the father of religious studies? Because he was really kind of the first one to do this in a systematic way. He was the one to really start studying religion, as a system, as something that could be studied and could be discussed, without talking about theology or beliefs, without getting into saying who's right and who's wrong, just religion as an object of scholarly study. He does this. And so he's called the father of religious studies. He was also a translator. I mean, I mentioned that he was a linguist, and he was especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, but he was an expert in Sanskrit, I believe. I believe it was Sanskrit, which is an ancient language from India. Sanskrit. Part of the same language family. I think I mentioned this before a few classes ago, about that there's a language family, a family of languages that stretch from the northern part of India going all the way to Europe. They're called the Indo-European languages. Well, Sanskrit is one of those. So if you look at the grammar and the vocabulary of Sanskrit, which is from India, and compare it with other ancient Western languages like Latin, Greek, you can see it somewhat in English as well. but English is far removed from Sanskrit, even though part of the same language family. But if you compare it to like Latin and Greek, you'll see in the grammar and the vocabulary, the words look very much the same. The grammar functions very much the same. Even the endings, like for verbs or for nouns that change, are somewhat the same, and sometimes exactly the same. So there is a connection there. So he was a scholar or an expert in Sanskrit. I don't know what other ancient languages, Eastern ancient languages, he was also a scholar in, but certainly Sanskrit, if I remember correctly. And he was a translator. So what he did was, and thank God for this, he moved to Britain, yes, and was teaching at Oxford. Well, at Oxford University, last time I checked, the means of communication was not German. It's English. So he was fluent in English. So he was teaching in English. And thank you, Friedrich Max Mueller, or sometimes it's just called Max Mueller. Thank you, Max. He translated all these texts from especially Eastern religions and all these languages that people could not speak into English. So you can see this here, in this series called the Sacred Books of the East series. Okay, so he didn't translate everything. This series was his work, but he also had the help of other scholars who would translate other works into English. But he was the editor, and anyways, he was the editor, and so he's associated with this, the Sacred Books of the East series, which is because it was done so long ago. Look at when he lived. Okay, he died in 1900, so it's all in the public domain. Okay, so you get PDF copies of this download. PDF copies, which I've done. It's online. SacredTexts.com has the whole series online, and so you can look at it. Yes, Miss.
Is this like a requirement for this class?
To read this?
Yeah.
No. Because this is many volumes. This is like it's. Oh yeah, no, that's okay. No. I have had students read from this though when I do like maybe world religions. I take selections from the Buddhist scriptures. I think it might only be Buddhism. Because Islam, there's plenty of stuff online for Islam. And same thing with Christianity and Judaism. You can find stuff online pretty easily. But some of the Buddhist stuff, see, that's one of the benefits of what he did here. Because he translated into English texts from, for example, Buddhism, that are really still today unavailable to most people in English. There might be people who are in the process of doing translations, but a lot of, he made available stuff that was not available back then. And even today, some of it is still not fully available, at least easily, to people. I'm not saying people haven't done subsequent translations of the same works, but they're certainly not in the public domain. So you might be able to find them on Google Books. You know how it is with Google Books. You get there, oh, the book is there. No preview, You can't see it. You can see that the book is there on Google Books, but you can't see the book. Here, you can see it. Now, one of the only, I guess a drawback to this is because it was done so long ago, the English translation is old. Okay, so it's not in modern English. It's still understandable. Oh, Hinduism, yes, Buddhism, and I also have used this for Hinduism. It's still understandable English, but it's older English, and so it's not always easy to read, but it is understandable. These are some of his books that he wrote. Essay on Comparative Mythology. Myths are stories, religious stories. Well, I shouldn't say they're religious stories, but oftentimes the myths have to deal with gods and goddesses and stuff like that. So there's tied to religion. Introduction to the Science of Religion. Here we go, 1873. So he writes a book, defending that religion as religion can be studied academically. It can be studied as an academic science. Okay? And then the Gifford lectures, I believe these are a series of lectures given up at a university in Scotland. I forget why they're called the Gifford lectures, but anyway, he gave a bunch of lectures up there trying to, again, explain his point of view that religion, like anything else, could be studied, because that made some people uncomfortable. You know, religion is a very personal thing, and it made some people might have been uncomfortable that you're taking my beliefs, you're talking about God, but you're not, you know, how do I put this? But you're not talking about God in a believing way. You're talking about God as something to study. And that might have made some people uncomfortable. He was defending his point of view here in the Gifford lectures that what he was doing was beneficial. And he was a believing man. He wasn't an atheist or an agnostic. He was actually a spiritual man. In religion. Whatever religion, I don't know what it is, but I do know he was spiritual, believed in God. Okay. I already said that. So it was his study of language that led him to a study of mythology, as I pointed out in the first book. He studied mythology. He studied the sacred stories that people told in the past about the world and how the world worked. And that led him to come up with what he called the quote-unquote science of religion. Okay, so this is how he's describing it. It's the science of religion. It's not like the natural sciences, like geology with rocks or biology with living things. This is the science of religion. For him, and I'll just tell you a little bit about what he thought religion was. I'm not going to tell you his whole theory about religion, because for the most part, it only has really historical value. I mean, it's interesting to know, but nobody really follows his theories about what religion is and where it came from, at least not modern religious studies. But he thought that religion was a mental state. Remember, he was a mental state, was a state of mind whereby the mind kind of understood or gave understanding to the infinite. Okay? That there was this infinite, call it God, but we'll stick with infinite. There was this infinite, this infinity, this thing without beginning or end, that people apprehended, that they kind of recognized, and they gave it different names. And this was known under different names. Remember, he's a linguist, so he's very interested in language and language study. So his theory, this theory that I'm telling you, is based on a lot of his language study of different religions, especially his language study of Sanskrit and Indian religion. And so that's I'm again, I'm giving you a summary. I'm not going deep into his whole theory, but this is basically his study of language is what led him to this theory. So for him, a word that was used to worship something or to describe a being, especially something powerful like the glowingness of the sun, the brightness of the sun, or something like that. That word that the people might have used to describe the brightness or the glowingness of, say, the sun, becomes like the name for a god, and even becomes the god itself. Okay? So you see the brightness of the sun, you call it, let's just say, for sake of example, I'm not saying that this is the exact example he gave or the words he used, but you see the sun brightness. Oh, it's very bright. You can't look at it. It hurts your eyes. You have to shade your eyes from it. The sun is very bright, and you feel the heat coming off of the brightness and stuff like that. So it's a very powerful thing. So it's clearly greater than you are because it's very hot. It hurts your eyes. Okay, it's up there in the sky where you are not. So it's high up there in the sky. It looks like it's big. So the sun is probably better than you are. So brightness, you call it brightness. this word brightness, you use it. That's the brightness up there. And then maybe you might start, because it is such a powerful thing and seems to have so much control over the world, like, things grow because of the sun. The sun gives you warmth so you don't freeze to death. So again, and it moves throughout the sky. So it's this very powerful, controlling thing. Maybe you start talking to it. Maybe you start asking it for things. Like you notice that the sun goes down below the earth at the end of the day. But where does it go? Well, maybe it goes underneath the earth where the dead people are. So if you talk to the sun, you can ask it to take messages with it. Take a message to my dead grandmother when you go down below. You see how the logic is working here? And then you talk about this brightness. Oh, the brightness is moving in the sky. The brightness. You're talking about the sun, of course. But you're calling it the brightness. But then you start praying to, oh, brightness, please take this prayer. Please take this message to my dead grandmother when you go. Now you see how the word to describe the thing becomes the thing. Okay, the word brightness, which describes the sun for you, now becomes a name. It becomes like the name of a god, which is the sun that you now talk to and pray to. That's kind of like the logic of Mueller's theory. No one believes in it today. It is a fascinating theory, though, and it's not. It's not stupid. You know what I'm saying? It has a reason for it, but is that where religion comes from? I don't think many religious scholars would say that that's what happens with religion. But it gives you an idea of where Mueller was coming from. For him, the study of religion was the study of language, studying of how people talked about their religious beliefs. If you listen to how people talked about their religious beliefs, it could give you an insight into what they believe. And that, I think, is true. That is a benefit for religious studies. So although his views on what religion is or where it came from are largely forgotten, and I think they're forgotten mainly because you can't prove it. I told you a little story about calling the sun, describing the sun as brightness, and how it then becomes it's called brightness, and then it becomes the god brightness that you pray to. But that's a story. That's my imagination, and that's his imagination, Mueller's imagination. How do you prove that that's what happened? The only evidence Mueller had, was really studying Sanskrit, studying language, and then coming up with a theory. But his theory wasn't really based in first-hand experience, going to India or talking to Hindus and saying, is this what you really believe? Does my theory sound right to you? So even though his views are largely forgotten, he still laid the foundation for examining religion in a systematic way. Again, the science of religion, Religionswissenschaft. I got you. Anyway, which translates to the science of religion, okay? Knowledge of religion, or the study of religion. Turn the page. What are some of the influences on religious studies? Well, just about, you can't get away from the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment. What was the Enlightenment? Well, you can see the dates there. Around 1650, circa 1650. CA is an abbreviation for Latin. Circa, like a circus, is a circle, right? It's a circle. So around. So around 1650 until around circa 1800, there was a movement within Europe especially, I should say really Europe actually. And what was this movement? Well, if any of you study history, then you know that nothing just starts, okay? There are always preambles. There are always beginnings. People before who kind of lay the groundwork and lay a little bit more of the groundwork and a little bit more, and then finally, boom, the thing explodes. Or if you want another image, the thing blossoms like a flower. Okay, and the same thing with the Enlightenment. I mean, you can locate the beginnings of the Enlightenment in early modern England and in France. I don't know if I have their picture. So people like Thomas Hobbes, who was an Englishman. You can see his dates there. I can't because I don't have my eyeglasses on. 1588 to 1699. So yeah, like 500 years ago, almost 500 years ago. Notice that he is before the 1650s. He was born before the 1650s. But a man like Thomas Hobbes, okay, is a forerunner, and also someone, this Frenchman, René Descartes. And one of the greatest figures, well, he's not before. I don't know why I put him on the slide. I'll hold off on him for the moment. Immanuel Kant. I wonder if I still put that on. I guess I didn't have to make a note of myself. Let me just make a note before I forget. And Locke. I think I put their dates down. Oh, whoopsie doodle. Okay. And one of the greatest of the Enlightenment figures is this German man, actually Prussian, but he's ethnically German. Again, you had Europe was a mess. It was a mishmash of all sorts of states and things, and there was an empire which was German speaking called Prussia, and Immanuel Kant was from Prussia, though he spoke German. And Prussia was huge. I mean, it was an empire. So Prussia included parts of modern-day Germany, but it also included parts of Poland. So it was a large empire spanning across Western and Eastern Europe. But one of the greatest lights of the Enlightenment was this philosopher Immanuel Kant. You can see when he lived. He lived pretty much near the end, the latter portion, the later portions of the Enlightenment. Whoops. I thought I put their pictures on it. Whoops. I guess I didn't put their pictures on the PowerPoint. Let me just check. No, I don't think I did. Okay, that's fine. I just get their pictures now. Pictures. Where are my pictures? I want to show you who are considered the fathers of the Enlightenment, and one of them is Isaac Newton. Both Englishmen, by the way. Where are you? There's Hobbes. Where's Isaac? There's Isaac Newton. So get his picture going there. And the other guy is father of the Enlightenment. There are two of them who are generally considered the fathers of the Enlightenment. The other one was John Locke. And where are you? There you are. Oops. There we go. Let me get their two pictures. And then Isaac Newton. Now, yeah, there you go. So, whoops, I don't want you to think that he's Thomas Hobbes. So people like Hobbes and Descartes, one an Englishman and one a Frenchman, were people who kind of came before and laid the foundations. And Immanuel Kant would be someone who was one of the greatest of the thinkers of the Enlightenment. But the fathers of the Enlightenment are considered these two gentlemen. On the left you have, on the left you have John Locke, and on the right you have Isaac Newton. Okay, and I don't know their dates. I didn't write that. Their dates were, they were in the 1700s. If someone wants to give me the dates for one of them or both of them, I would not. I would be appreciative. But, anyways. Oops, I wrote October 13th. John Locke. And Isaac Newton. Dates to be announced. Yes, Ms. Randazzo.
Google says John Locke was born in 1632 and died 1704.
1632, 1704. Excellent, thank you. Anyone have Ms. Marquez? Did you raise your hand? Did you find Isaac Newton?
Yeah.
1643 to 1727. Okay, there we go. So that's right in the timeline. Well, of course, the timeline is a creation of historians, but 1650 to the 1800s. So, anyways, why are they considered the founders, or at least what was something? Why is it called the Enlightenment, and what was it all about? Basically, the Enlightenment was a European movement which represented a cultural shift, basically away from a religious worldview, one could say, in simple terms. It was basically just a shift in the way of looking at the world from before. It was more of a worldview rooted in religion and tradition, okay? How things had always been done, what you had always been told about things. And it was moving away from that towards relying on actual human experience, number one, and reason, number two. So there are two things we can note about the Enlightenment. Human experience and reason, human reason. I could probably just write experience and reason here. I think the human element is probably understood. So experience and reason. So, in contrast to what had come before, you didn't look to the Bible for the answer to all the questions. You didn't need a God so you didn't need a revelation. You could think for yourself, reason. You had reason and you should use it. So you didn't need to have a book or something to tell, even given from a God, to tell you what to think and how to make decisions. The same thing goes for experience. You could rely on actual human experience, what people do and what happens to them in making decisions about how things should be done. Again, you didn't need to rely on a God telling you to do things or the church telling you how things should be done, or whether something would work or not. You could experiment. You could do experiments and see, okay, well, maybe I think that if I do this, then that will happen. The church says, no, that won't happen. Well, why not? Well, because we've always believed that that would not happen. Well, let me run my experiment anyways. And see what happens. See what happens. Human experience, okay? Not relying on what came in the past. Okay, in the past we were always told that this was how the world worked. The world worked such and such a way. But now I'm going to test those ideas. Is it true that, well, anyways, I think you get the point. Is it true what I've been told, or can I test it and see if there is another better answer to the question? Well, I guess if I could give an example, I'm just trying to think of an example I could give that would be appropriate to the time period. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a good example. We've been told, maybe in the 1500s or whatever, people were told, or it was just assumed, that the sun was moving in the sky, using my previous example of the sun. that the sun was moving, and you can see it moving. So your eyes don't lie, right? I mean, your eyes are telling you the truth of reality, and you see this glowing ball of heat that's moving through the sky all the time, day after day after day. Not during the night, of course. Well, actually, no, the sun doesn't move. But we know that because someone challenged that, said, this is how we've always been taught, but let me do experiments. Let me observe the sun, and let me use trigonometry or mathematics to then triangulate the position of the sun in the sky and the earth and see if that's true. Do the results, does the data show that the sun is actually moving, or does the data show that no, it makes more sense that we're moving and the sun is the fixed point and we're moving? It makes more sense to what the numbers say. Experimentation, not just taking it for granted as we have been told for centuries and centuries and centuries. Experimentation, actual human experience. But all the Enlightenment thinkers, who were very different men and had different interests, they all agreed on one thing. There was one thing that united them, even out of these two things: reason, using human reason, unaided human reason, not relying on the revelation of a God or reading some book like the Bible. Reason, unaided reason, was what they all agreed on, the use of unaided reason to come to answers about how the world worked. And this applied even to religion and religious questions. So religion and religious dogmas or religious teachings were questioned. They were subjected to the same two standards of human experience and rational, reasonable thought. Okay? So here you can see, religion, and sometimes it's called religion and science, but you see religion and the Enlightenment kind of coming at loggerheads or coming into conflict with each other, because all of a sudden, the answers that maybe the religious groups like the church were giving were found to be wrong or not helpful anymore, and now they start feeling challenged, like their authorities challenged. And so you have some maybe bad blood or some conflict arising. And it did not help that some of the Enlightenment members were actually hostile towards religion, especially Christianity and Judaism. So that wasn't helpful, their hostile attitude. But the Enlightenment was not so much an anti-religious movement, although, as I said, conflict with religion does happen, because until the Enlightenment and modern science, the religion was pretty much all you had as a general explanation for the world. I mean, I shouldn't say the only thing, pretty much the only thing. I mean, there were scientific endeavors going on. I mean, people were doing things. But as an explanation for life for most people, religion was pretty much it. And if you were in Europe, it was pretty much Christianity. After Christianity, then it would be Judaism. So it wasn't so much an anti-religious movement as the Enlightenment was more an emphasis on the power of human experience and reason, and how these could give answers to questions of natural importance, the natural world. They weren't concerned so much about the spiritual world. Okay, that's probably where religion and the Enlightenment came into conflict, where religion was trying to give explanations based on spiritual authority to really what were natural questions. Like, how do we breathe? What allows us to breathe? Well, we know it's oxygen. We also know about anatomy in our lungs, and the diaphragm pulls down and it creates a vacuum and we're able to breathe. Okay, you don't need a pope. Not necessarily, unless the pope is a medical doctor. But you don't need a pope or a priest or a rabbi to tell you how people breathe, or you wouldn't even go to your priest or rabbi to ask them for the question to tell me why or how people breathe, how the human body breathes, is able to breathe. And that might be where the conflict comes in, where religion is trying to give spiritual answers to things that are really not within its wheelhouse, as we say. It's not within its provenance. It's not within its ability to give answers to. The Enlightenment had a very high-placed emphasis on the natural sciences and the results of natural sciences. Okay, even in this period, which was really the baby period, the infancy period for science. I mean, people have been doing scientific things before that, and I don't want to give the impression that once 1650 came around that all of a sudden people discovered microscopes, you know, and discovered that, you know, astronomy, you know. No, people have been doing things before, but something had changed. As I said, it was a cultural shift. There was some kind of, the culture had changed. And so now there was this even higher emphasis on just simply the natural sciences, not focusing on the supernatural or the otherworldly, but focusing on what's going on here in the natural world. And so natural sciences receives a lot of emphasis. And as discoveries are made, you know, some like Lavoisier discovers oxygen, so we're breathing oxygen, amongst other things. You know, what's the other element after oxygen that we breathe? What's the other most, I say prosperous, the most prevalent element in our atmosphere after oxygen? Hydrogen? Is it hydrogen? Carbon? Ah! Nitrogen, yes? I should have said, what are the prevalent elements after? Yeah. Hydrogen, not carbon. I mean, we give off carbon, but actually oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. So we're not, I mean, we say, okay, we're breathing oxygen, but we're actually breathing a lot more than that. Okay? Call it a cocktail of sorts. All right, which we do. And we're also breathing in dust, which is dirt and dead human hair and insects. we're breathing in a lot of things that maybe we don't want to think about. So shut up, Dr. Dunn. Move on. My point is this, that as the results, as people started making discoveries and finding things, like, yeah, people started discovering that if you put two lenses together, that you could actually see over long distances. You could see farther than the human eye could see. And oh, you could do that. So I could see someone a couple miles away relatively clearly with making this little thing, you know. But what if I turn it up to the sky? Ooh, and start looking at stars and at the moon and stuff like that. Don't look at the sun though. And you start discovering planets. Of course, they knew the planets are up there already because you can, you know, with some of the planets are so close, like Mars and Venus, and Jupiter is so huge that you can see them with the naked eye. You can see them with your eye. You can, if you know where to look, you can see them moving from night to night, moving along the sky. You know, you can, well, can't see them moving actually. I mean, they're slow. But you know, if you plot it from night to night, you can see that, oh, all the other lights in the sky are staying put, they're in place, but this big light is here, and then it's here the next day, it was here, and now it's there, and now it's there, and now it's there, and now it's there. It's going across the sky. It's a planet, a wanderer, as they say. So everything wanted to be like science. I mean, that was the big thing, especially once you hit the 1800s, when religious studies gets to be founded by Max Muller. And as I said, what did he call it? The science of religion. Everybody wants to be like the natural sciences. Why? Because, well, you can see the results. They're making all sorts of discoveries, all sorts of fascinating discoveries. They're telling us how the world works. So the natural sciences seem to be able to give answers that religion can't give answers to, or its answers turn out to be wrong. So everyone wants to be a science, including the study of religion. Hence, the science of religion. Religious studies. So religious studies uses the strategies and the assumptions of the natural sciences. Okay, so it uses those things. I mean, it is not a natural science. Religious studies is not a natural science. It's not like geology or biology or chemistry in that sense. Okay, so it's not a natural science in that sense. But it does use the strategies of natural science. What do I mean by strategies? You know, experimentation, you could say, statistics, mathematics, statistical analysis, observation, okay, observation, human observation, okay, experience, okay, reasoning towards conclusions rather than just taking religious answers as the final answer. Okay, so it approximates and assumes things that the natural sciences also assume, and other fields do the same thing. I mean, this in the 1800s, this is also when you see the beginnings of stuff like anthropology, which is the study of humankind, of humanity, sociology, which is the science which studies human society, psychology, the science which studies the mind. Now, none of these are sciences like the natural sciences, but again, they assume the same kind of things, using human experience and human reason to study their subjects. Although, I mean, they'll even sometimes call them laboratories. If anyone here is taking psychology, has taken psychology, is going to major in psychology, you will have to do laboratories sometimes. Sometimes they'll have psychological labs where, I don't know, you might run experiments and stuff like that, giving people sheets of paper and asking them to answer a bunch of questions, you know, showing them cards and asking them what they see and stuff like that, and then comparing the results. So some of these things are more science-y, you might say, than others. Like psychology is more like science, the natural sciences, I would say, than anthropology. What are some of the assumptions of the Enlightenment that religious studies also shares? Well, there are several. Take the gentleman away. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, and get the PowerPoint. First one is materialism. Materialism. What is materialism? Materialism is the view that all reality is composed of material, though only of physical matter. Okay, there is no supernatural stuff. It is everything is matter, and you can see from where it comes from. The Latin word materia. Down here. Is that broken?
I think it's broken.
Oh, okay. Yeah, oh no, have I drawn that? Oh, all right. Check my phone then. Latin materia, this word materia, from which we get the word material, simply means that as stuff, yeah? The word, right? Stuff, but it means it as in a food stuff, you know, food that you stuff in your face, maybe. Hopefully not, because then you'll become like me. Then you'll have to do exercises and stuff like that, you know, the mummy walk and, you know, the zombies, all that stuff. All right. But as in, you know, just, and I said, a lot, when you look at etymologies and you look at where words come from, a lot of times they just come from very simple, basic human things, human activities. Food, materia, food, stuff to eat. One of the most basic needs that we have as humans to feed ourselves so we can continue living. But it can also have the sense of a cause or a source, okay? As in the cause or source of something. So anyway, so matter, okay? So the physical stuff, matter. So materialism. So it is the physical world, the material world, which is the focus of study. And there's really no consideration beyond that. I mean, when a religious studies scholar studies religion, the question of whether the gods really exist, the supernatural realm that people are saying exists in their religion, that's not a question. The assumption is that the world is simply material, not super material, and no more. Check I have my alarm. Oh, okay, we're fine. I got my alarm set. So another assumption is called naturalism. Just as the world is not spiritual, it is material, the world is also not supernatural, it is natural. So the only adequate source for explaining all phenomena, the only adequate source or origin for explaining everything that happens and that is the natural world. Well, as I did, I put it in. And the word, again, very simple, the word naturalism or nature comes simply from the Latin verb born, nascor, natus, to be born. I have to give you both forms. Actually, nascor literally in I be born. Well, it's the passive, but it's fluent verb, which means I have to show them. Don't worry, I'm just myself. Imagine, nascor natus, to be born. To be born. So nature is the world we are born into. The most basic form of nature is like the most basic form of matter is our food. The most basic form of nature is for us to be born. That's our first experience of experience. We're born. We're out of course, we're experiencing things in the womb, so we believe. I got you. But once you're out of the womb, you know, there's a whole world to discover. Excuse me. Well, let me just see if I want to say anything more about that. I think I already might have mentioned it, but I'll just say one. Yeah, so the focus is on the natural world then in your studies. And again, when you're doing religious studies, you believe that you know that the people that you're talking to or studying might believe that there is something beyond the natural world, but that's not the influence. You're looking at it from the perspective that the explanations of what they believe and why they believe are not to be sought in a supernatural other world, is to be sought in the natural world. And the needs of that world, food, procreation, sex, fear of death, stuff like that, natural needs, yes? And we came across those, hopefully, or you came across those, hopefully, when you did the reading, What is Religion, from that textbook, The Almanac, that I gave you. They talk about that, about one of the theories of where religion comes from is from the natural need to avoid death. So naturalism. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Take a break. Yes. Yes. Dude, oh, maybe we should talk out in the hall.
Yes.
maybe I don't have. You can. No.
It is very, I feel bad for him because he seems like the one who's
dokie. We'll start in a moment on the next influence. Maybe I'll write them down. Or write down what I've done so far. Is there a cafe in this building? Is there a cafe? Is it still open?
I don't know if it's still open right now.
Oh, okay. Just curious. I didn't realize there was. I saw it on the map out there. Okay.
So, I think we're talking about two,
Oh, two?
yeah, 2 or 3 or 4.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I guess I won't go there then. All right, naturalism. What's the next one? The next one should be empiricism. And this is kind of a repeat of what I've already told you. Remember that the Enlightenment was very much concerned with human experience, okay? Finding out for yourself, thinking for yourself. And here's what this idea of finding out for yourself or relying on human experience is called empiricism. The practice of relying on one's own observation and experimentation for all human knowledge. Not relying on authority to tell me that, what light is or whether the sun moves in the sky, but relying on my observation of that thing and my experimentation to see if it is true. Is the sun really moving, or am I moving on the earth? Is light is it just light? Is it one thing? Or is it actually broken up into different colors? Is it a wave? Or is it a photon? What is it? Well, someone could say, well, open your Bible and turn to the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 11. And that'll tell you. Or this is what Aristotle, the philosopher Aristotle, thought about light. Okay, well, those are traditional answers, but I should find out for myself. And that's what's going on with empiricism. And the word itself, empiria, means in English experience. Your experience of something. Hello. That's okay. I just moved on to the next influence, which is empiricism. Using human experience, relying on human experience. And I'm recording this, so when I upload it to Blackboard and it's on YouTube, you can go over this, what you might have missed. Is that okay? Are you talking to me? Talking to Ms. Campbell? Okay. So empiricism, human experience as the source of our knowledge, not something coming from a god or gods or spirits. Again, that doesn't deny that there are gods and spirits. They're just not the source of knowledge The next influence is evolutionism. Evolutionism. Yeah. After that is that. What is evolutionism? It is the theory that all living things pass through stages of development, typically from lower to higher forms, from simpler forms to more complex. I say typically because not necessarily. I mean, I guess you'll always find the exception that proves the rule, where things are becoming maybe less complex. You might find more complex forms in the simpler stage, and as maybe certain characteristics are taken away through evolutionary process, you come to a less complex form. But basically, you're going from lower to higher. And the word evolutionism, the word evolution comes from the verb to evolve, and that comes from Latin ex volvo, to roll out of something.
Okay, to evolve is, volvo means to roll, or to turn around. Turn something around, but turning something, not turning around. I am Volvo. Ego Volvo! Ooh. Anyway, and to turn out of, something turns out of something else. And that's kind of the idea of evolution, that you have a previous form and then there are changes and it turns into something else. Ex volvo. Okay. What does this have to do with religion? Well, in religious studies, they kind of use this idea. Remember, again, evolution comes later. Evolution comes in the 1800s with Charles Darwin, this man Charles Darwin. So it comes actually after the period of the Enlightenment.
But it becomes such the explanation for everything. When Charles Darwin proposed that life forms evolve from simpler to more complex forms, I mean, this really got everyone's imagination going. It seemed to be like the key that unlocked a lot of things. And one of those was religion. So one man, for example, James Fraser, he had this theory where he believed that he applied this idea of evolutionism to religion. And he thought that first you had religion act itself went through stages. The most basic stage was magic. And magic, once it became more developed, became religion. But eventually religion would become more developed and it would eventually become science. Okay? Now, I mean, most people do not follow Fraser's view on this, that first you have magic, then you have, magic becomes more developed into more complexity and becomes what we call religion, and then religion kind of becomes more complex and evolves into science. Okay, where you then don't need these previous forms. Once you've reached the ultimate stage, which is science and the evolutionary process, you don't need the previous ones. It's kind of like when we lost our tails. When we were all primates swinging around in the trees with our tails, and eventually we lost those things. We lost some of the characteristics that made us primates, okay, made us related to like chimpanzees. We evolved. We went from our, magical stage to our religion stage, and now we're in the science stage. We are fully formed human Homo sapiens. And this is how he kind of saw it with religion. Religion was a stage on the way from magic at the bottom to religion, and then eventually we'll get to where there's just science. We won't need religion anymore. Okay, that characteristic will have been evolved out of us. You hear this still today, and sometimes you hear this still today. People will talk about, well, we needed religion in the past to explain things, but now we have science, so we don't need it anymore. We don't need religion anymore. We have science. Okay, except that now there are a lot of people who are finding that science doesn't have all the answers. That science, of course, just like religion, is full of human beings who maybe they know what they're doing, but sometimes they don't. And science cannot give 100, it never could. I mean, you shouldn't overpromise. Even the natural sciences cannot give a 100% answer to every question. Some things are just probabilities. We think that this is it. Okay? So evolutionism. And then finally, agnosticism. Not atheism, saying there is no God or there are no gods or spirits. Agnosticism, saying that, well, we don't know and probably can't know. And it's not really our job to know, as religious studies scholars. So agnosticism, the belief that the existence or the nature of any ultimate being or reality is unknown or unknowable. So you can't know whether God exists, and you can't really know what God is. It's kind of what agnosticism is about. Like an agnostic might say, well, there may be a God, but how would you know? I mean, how is it possible for me, a creature, to know that? There may be a God. So an agnostic would hold out the possibility of there being the existence of, say, supernatural things like angels or spirits or gods. But how would I know? And maybe would even say, you can't know. It might be true, but you cannot know. So it's unknowable. Or an agnostic might say, well, it's just simply unknown. We have no evidence whether there is a God or there isn't a God. An atheist says, no, there is no God. But an agnostic might say, well, I can't say that. I can't say 100% there is no God. I have to leave the possibility that there may be. But I think it's unknown. We don't have any evidence to show there is a God. So agnosticism comes from the Greek, agignosko. Agignosko. Know, to know something. Meaning not knowing. Agnostic. Okay? Remember, same language family, so sometimes you see overlap in the words. If you've ever wondered why there's a silent K here, okay, why it's not to know, well, it used to be to know. If you were speaking English 500 years ago, or 600 years ago, Middle English, basically Middle English, the K would have been pronounced. It would have been, I know after the class today. Or it would be, I am cutting a steak with my knife, my knife. Okay? Gnosko, still there in the Greek, related languages. Know, right? Same thing. So not knowing. Religious studies scholars are not there to judge whether the gods or the spirits exists. Even if they do believe in them, they might still believe that there is a God or there is a supernatural realm. But religious studies shares the what's the word I'm looking for here? Shares the assumption, I guess, that at least in practice, to act as if this is knowledge that nobody can really know about, and we're not here to make a judgment on whether the God these people are praying to actually exists or not. Agnosticism. So what does this mean for religious studies? Oh, and I already mentioned that. Okay. Well, it means that what does this look like in reality? What does it look like in practice for religious studies? Well, first of all, that there is no supernatural, there is no supernatural or invisible or non-material place or realm of existence that exists. There are no supernatural, invisible, non-material beings that exist. That only natural physicalistic explanations, physicalistic just means based in the physical and the material. So only natural material explanations of religious phenomena are valid. So they don't look at whether the truth or the falseness of what the people believe. They provide simply material explanations. It's based in materialism and naturalism. Those are the only valid explanations for religious phenomena. And these things must be personally observed. A claim to an invisible reality doesn't really count for much in religious studies. Or if someone says, I'm a prophet, I'm receiving messages from God in my head. Okay, that's fine. But for a religious studies person, from that perspective, that doesn't really count as evidence of anything. What it counts as evidence for is that X, so-and-so, is claiming that he or she is receiving revelations from a God and is a prophet, is claiming to be a prophet. That's all it means. I mean, I can't observe, I as a religious studies scholar can't observe someone receiving messages from a God. I can't see the message come down from some realm or some other place of existence and go into the person's head and have them speak the revelation. I can't see that. It has to be personally observable. Now, a miracle, maybe, like if someone is sick or like they can't walk, they're physically incapable of walking, and all of a sudden when someone prays over that person, the person is able to get up and their legs are perfectly healthy, completely healthy. That is personally observable. And that's within the realm of, say, what a religious studies scholar could discuss and could talk about. That still doesn't mean that the religious studies scholar could say, well, that was a supernatural event, because all they could say was, well, I saw someone place hands on the person and say some words to a God, and then the person stood up and started walking again. Okay, that's what I observed. Remember, it's descriptive. That's what I observed. But I'm making no judgment on whether it was a real miracle or there's a supernatural thing to go on. The religious studies scholars might describe his or her feelings like, oh, I really felt excited for the person, that now they were whole and could walk. But maybe I don't know why that happened. No gods or God or spirits are really accepted for religious studies. No otherworldly realities. Okay? And there is some, well, at least in the early days of religious studies, as I showed you with James Fraser's model here, that there was the idea that religious belief was a lower form of belief. Religion was basically the best explanation when people didn't have very good explanations about how the world worked. So religion was a lower stage on the evolution of human knowledge. So there can be that kind of negative view sometimes in religious studies, that religious belief is a lower form of belief. Now, religious studies is talking here about the nature of religious studies, what it is. It is not really a science per se. It's not really science per se. Like we think of the natural sciences, biology, astronomy, chemistry, stuff like that. But it is scientific. It is scientific. It's not a science, but it is scientific. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that it is a form of knowledge. If I go, here we go. It is a form of knowledge. The word science simply means knowledge. Scientia. The Latin word scientia, or scientia, pronounced it different ways, means knowledge. Have a good night. Well, scientia. So religious studies is not a science per se, and that's kind of what Max Mueller was getting at when he said that it was the science of religion. He didn't mean that it was like the natural sciences. He meant it was knowledge. You're studying religion for knowledge, for the sake of knowledge. Not to push a religion on anyone, not to prove a religion to anyone, but simply for the sake of human knowledge, for academic study. It is scientific, it is not science. However, as I said before, religious studies does use the strategies and assumptions of the natural sciences. It also uses those strategies from other fields like anthropology, sociology, and psychology that I've already mentioned. What makes religious studies different is that its focus of study, I guess you could call it its data for religious studies, is human experience itself. Because that's kind of like what religion is dealing with. And maybe I should, oh yes. And that's what religious studies is dealing with, is talking about the big questions. Why are we here? I mean, philosophy also deals with that, but think bigger even than philosophy. Okay, why is anything here? Did it come from somewhere? If it came from somewhere, is that a God? Stuff like that. What if there is a God? What could that God be like? All right. So to some extent, those questions, again, there's overlap. There's overlap with human philosophy as well. But the totality of human experience, ultimate human experience. Remember, religion is about ultimate reality. So religious studies is dealing with subjective data, human subjects. We are subjects. Each one of us experiences what's going on differently. Right now we have, me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We had another person, 10. But we have 9 people in this classroom. Each person in this classroom is a subject and is experiencing what's going on right now in your own unique way. Okay? Just from the simple fact that you're all seated in different places in the room. So you're not seeing me from the same direction. I'm not seeing you from the same direction. Okay? Just simple, in that simple way. So that's what we mean when we say something is subjective. You're the experiencing subject. Empiricism. Wisdom, be attentive. Okay? Human experience. We're all experiencing things subjectively. And so, our subjective experience can have a variety of interpretations. And that's why, as such, religious studies has more in common with other science-like fields. I like to call them science. Also, they're scientific fields. They're science-like anthropology and sociology, psychology, history, archaeology, okay, which are more like arts. Yes, there's data, and there's data that's collected, but it has to be interpreted. Whereas when you're dealing with a chemistry lab, well, if you take chemical A and chemical B and you put them together and poof, something happens, and something, depending on which chemicals they are, it's always going to happen every time. It's just the way it is. Mathematics. You add 1 + 1, you get 2. Every time. Well, maybe. From what I understand, I'm not a mathematician, but I do find it fascinating. Once you get into apparently really big numbers, then 1 + 1 does not always equal 2, apparently. Something like that. Anyways, you'd have to talk to a theoretical mathematician. Because numbers can get crazy, even though, but nevertheless, at least let's just go with this. 1 + 1 = 2 all the time. Numbers work the same all the time, as far as you know in mathematics. It's not the same way in anthropology or psychology or history, where yes, you have data that's collected, but there's a large element of interpretation that needs to happen. Okay, and there can be different interpretations. So because religious studies shares that in common, that subjectivity in common, we're dealing with human beings and human experiences, it stands to reason that it's going to utilize a lot of those methodologies and techniques. It's going to fall back on some of the technologies and techniques in anthropology and psychology, history, and use those for the main focus on what is the ultimate human experience, which is religion. I have a description here from a lady. I thought it was interesting. It's a TED Talk that she gave, and I think it's appropriate now to play it because she discusses this a little bit. There we go. Where is it? Where did I put it? Oh, here we go. Why? Let's go. It's not very long, so.
Good afternoon. So my premise is that we have put religion into boxes. One is a row, it says Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Baha'i, Judaism, Islam, and so on. Second set of boxes is a pair. And the first says good, and the second says bad. So I want us to talk about religion and spirituality. I want us to talk about religion and spirituality so we can take those topics out of those boxes and play with them. Get to push at them, tug at them a little bit, toss them in the air, turn them inside out. I want us to explore religion and spirituality with fresh eyes and ask as many new questions as we can possibly think of. So when I say that we can talk about religion and spirituality, who is we? When I use the word we in that sentence, I am throwing the doors wide open, inviting everybody into the conversation. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself religious or not. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself spiritual or not. It doesn't matter if you were raised in a single religious tradition your whole life, or it doesn't matter if you're raised in two religious traditions because your parents were of different faiths. It doesn't matter if you are spiritual but not religious. It doesn't matter if you've changed religion. It doesn't matter if you've tossed religion out the door. For example, I was raised United Methodist. When I was in junior high and high school, what that meant is that religion shaped the structure of my Sundays. So, whole family went to church, I went off to Sunday school, then we had the church service, afternoon was spent with the youth group, and then I had to go back with another group of friends, and we had rehearsal for the handbell choir. Yes, I was in a handbell choir. And somewhere in the morning, we had coffee hour, and when I was in junior high, the goal was to snag as many cookies as you could without getting caught. Right? So you get some idea of how my Sunday went. Now, on the other hand, some of the best scholars of religion in the country weren't raised in a religious tradition at all. They call themselves nuns, N-O-N-E-S, right? And that number is growing. So it doesn't matter if you're an atheist. It doesn't matter if you're an agnostic. It doesn't matter if you are spiritual or religious. There is no admission ticket to these conversations. What does matter is that you want to talk about religion and spirituality. What does matter is that we do it as broadly as we can possibly imagine. So when I say that we can talk about religion and spirituality, we get to define it however we want. Let me explain why I say that. Scholars of religion and theology have written volumes, and believe me, volumes, on how to define religion, how to define theology, who is God. That's the point of many of the courses that we teach in the religion department, to wrestle with the big defining questions. What is Buddhism? Who is Muhammad? Is Roman Catholicism in Kalamazoo the same as Roman Catholicism in 1970s Brazil? What does Judaism look like in 18th century France? What is that space between Jesus Christ and the establishment of Christianity as a religion? So these are the questions we ask in the classroom. When I say that I want us to talk about religion and spirituality, though, I really want us to talk about religion and spirituality outside the classroom. So for you, if religion means the faith that you were raised in, that's great. If for somebody else it means that you define spirituality as hiking along the Cascade Crest Trail, that's wonderful, beautiful part of the country. If for somebody else religion means the opiate of the masses, then I'm really, really happy that you have read Karl Marx. And if religion is something that you've left behind, it's not a problem. If somebody else defines religion in a very personal way, that you're struggling with trying to understand what religion means for your life personally, there are a lot of other people who are asking exactly the same question, and you have a lot of company. So for the purposes of these conversations, we get to define what spirituality and religion mean for our lives. That's the important thing. We get to do the defining. So, my next premise is that we should only talk about religion and spirituality with people that we like. Yeah, let me say it again so you really get it. I propose that we only talk about religion and spirituality whose company we enjoy. Friends, family, relatives, people you'd like to get to know better. And I've already heard your titter, and you know that you're kind of breathing a sigh of relief there. Oh, good, she's not saying that I have to talk about religion and spirituality with the person who comes to knock on my door about some strange religious tradition I don't know anything about. Right. I'm not saying talk to everybody about religion. Right? I personally have a very difficult time talking about any topic with people who are interested in mutual exchange. Same is true for religion. Good conversations require a sense of vulnerability. In order to hear what our conversation partners have to say, we need to suspend our presuppositions and our assumptions. We need to set those aside and just listen. And in order to be heard by our conversation partners, we need to reach down deep and find the words to put to just those things that we're thinking about religion and spirituality. We need to be candid, we need to be open, and just because we're being candid and open doesn't mean we're being all nice and agreeable. Oh yeah, that's cool, right? You get into real arguments and exchanges. That's when the best conversations occur. So, when we talk with people that we like, that's when we learn the most. We enjoy the give and take, and we learn more from each other than we would learn just on our own. So, what is it that we learn when we start talking about religion and spirituality? Well, the first thing is that we learn that people have a whole lot of different ways of talking about it. Right? So, not only the content, but how they talk about it. Some people are nervous, some people are okay. And the other thing we learn is that religion and spirituality mean very, very different things to a lot of people. I want to give you an example of a conversation I often have, and it's usually with people who have just met me. They say, "So, Carol, what do you do for a living?" And I always have a great response. I say, "I teach religion." Absolute stillness. Not a word, right? Then the eyebrow goes up. Sometimes it's this one, sometimes it's this one. You have to look at me. You say, so, and I bail them out at that point, and I say, I teach comparative religion, or I teach Buddhism and Hinduism at college. And then invariably the next comment is, "Oh, that's so cool! I always wanted to know more about Buddhism." And then we're off to a good conversation, because Buddhism, of course, is the good religion. Inevitably, the next question is, so do you believe in Buddhism? And when I say I am most comfortable being Buddhist in a Buddhist country like Burma or Sri Lanka, then I really get the raised eyebrows. They're like, right? They get the funny looks. And then I have to go on and explain that for me, religion isn't about belief. It's about how it feels. So is it a natural thing to go to the local temple? Does everybody take their shoes off when you go up the stairs? Where do you get your offerings? Do you recognize the chants that are being played over the loudspeaker? Do you know the prayers? And at this point, they're kind of getting it, right? And then when I say it's no different for me than it was for my grandmother who said she went to church for the music, then they get it, that this is about how it feels. And at that point in time, I usually reflect the question back to them. I say, so what does religion feel like for you? And then we have a really interesting conversation. And in that exchange, although I've just, in the course of coming up with this talk, I've only come to think of this as the process of taking religion out of boxes. But we've taken religion out of the Buddhism box, and we've also taken Buddhism out of the good box, and we mixed it up a little bit. My conviction is that the best conversations about religion and spirituality are those convictions that are woven into other conversations about what's going on in our life. Let me give you another example. I have a neighbor, she's no longer a neighbor, she used to be a neighbor, and we would walk our dogs in the evening. I don't have a dog seat, but you get what I'm saying. And we would walk, around the neighborhood, about a mile loop, and we would just talk about our day, how'd it go, what was going on, how the dog's doing, what's making you crazy. And after a few years of doing this on a regular basis, I realized that she went to early mass every Sunday. And that just became part of the thing that we would talk about. I said, did you go to mass today? She said, yeah. And we would kind of move on. And recently, I have come, even though those conversations have stopped, I've come to think about those conversations as sort of things that make up our life. And I realized in the course of our conversations that when she would talk about going to mass and what that meant to her, it was exactly the same way as I would talk about going down to the local Kalamazoo Gay and Lesbian Resource Center, where I was and still am on the board, right? These are both things that are time commitments for us. We commit our time and our energy to the institutions, the Roman Catholic Church on the one hand, local nonprofit on the other, and they shape the texture and the shape of our week and our months and our daily lives. Now, you might think that somebody who is a devout Roman Catholic wouldn't have anything in common with somebody like me. I've been out as a lesbian for well over 30 years. Right? If you pay attention to the media, Roman Catholic lesbian, absolutely antithetical. Right? But when we embed that conversation in how we really live our lives, religion is just a thing. It's not a big thing. It's just a thing. Helps us shape and define our lives, and it certainly has never gotten in the way of our friendship. Even though we don't walk the dogs together, we still are friends to this day. So, religion and spirituality don't fit into the boxes. Right? Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, good, bad. Religion and spirituality are bigger than those boxes. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there isn't such a thing as Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism. Good, bad. Religion is good, right? Religion is bad. There is absolutely no denying that, and I'm not going to argue otherwise. But I am saying that we can talk about religion and spirituality in a more expansive way. Religion and spirituality are about big questions. What do we think the world is? What is human nature? It's about the fact that people have asked these questions for hundreds and thousands of years. Right? Certain religions have rejected some answers and kept others. And when we begin to talk about it, just in a usual human way, we get to wrestle with those questions and answers too. In short, we get to make religion human. We get to define it, we get to answer it, we get to take religion and spirituality and make it real for us. So, talk about religion, talk about spirituality. Above all, make these conversations real, and then see what happens. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yes, hello again.
So my premise is that
Actually, what is
we have put religion into boxes.
Okay, interesting. Go back to this. I was there. Okay, what did you think? Any thoughts? It makes sense? Yes.
That you said in the video that it was interesting was the fact that there were a lot of very mass, like the same, like the equivalent of her going to the Gay and Lesbian Resource Center, and how they're both basically just time commitments and like things that we use to shape our lives. And it made me think about how like a lot of, I guess, religions, or like you can find this, like if you go to like a church or a mosque or a synagogue, you have these basically like club type organizations where, you know, you just spend your time in a way that's not necessarily like controlling, like you're not like, not that that's a bad thing, but like it kind of has about the same kind of feeling as like a club or some kind of, you know, it's not all just like, you know, bowing your head in prayer all the time. It's just, it's a commitment, like, you know, you have practice for the church, but you have like other like, things that are not necessarily like 100% spiritual all the time.
Yeah, you're there with people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes that can be important, yeah. Even though I guess you should be there for God, but but you know, sometimes it's nice to have people around. Anyone else have any comments, observations? Not all of it related to what I've been talking about, but I was mainly thinking in my head about the things she was talking about, how we all, the subjective aspect, that we all have ideas about what religion is and what it means for us. Not sure I can. Well, I didn't really agree with her on the religion aspect of it, but I mean, I had, I guess, 2 points that I had issues with. I don't want to sound negative, but because it was good. I mean, I appreciated what she was saying, you know, about not being afraid to be in conversation with people. But I don't know. Sometimes I felt kind of, I didn't feel very positive about her statement that you should only talk with people you like. Did anyone think about that or have anything to say about that? I mean, I can, if I think about it, I can understand it, but you go ahead, Ms. Miller.
I was also thinking about what does it mean to like someone? Does it mean that you know someone really well, or is it like a immediate attraction that you think this person might accept or understand what I've said? And I couldn't really think, or I didn't understand really what she meant by that. And it's also then maybe not challenging in a way that, you know, we have to sometimes consider we have to maybe step up and speak to people that we might think, oh, maybe they won't understand. I thought the same, that I wasn't sure that she was really happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only tell you what I thought, if that's okay. I mean, I thought she was talking about people that you were friendly with, like her friend, but not people that are trying to maybe push you on their religion. Because she said, you know, she had problems, you know, when it's a one-way street. Because if you're someone, not necessarily a friend, but someone where it's a two-way street, they're willing to listen to what you're saying, and you listen to what they're saying, and it goes back and forth, rather than, and she used the example of people who come like knocking on the door to talk to you about their religion, or they just want to convert you, where it's a one-way street. I'm here to sell you my product, you accept it, yes, hi, how are you? You don't accept it, you're burning hell! You know, something like that, you know. That's what I thought. But I thought your point was good, because sometimes you do, I mean, you learn things sometimes from people you disagree with. Maybe? Yeah. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I've met with people that I've, you know, were missionaries, like Mormon missionaries, or they like to be called Latter-day Saints now. But Mormons I've talked to said they don't seem to care whether you say Mormon or Latter-day Saint. But anyways, you have the two guys. They also have women who also go around, but a lot of times you'll see there are two men who go around and they dress in shirt and tie. And Jehovah's Witnesses go from door to door, or they're on street corners. They'll hand out their magazines. I don't mind talking to them if I want to. I mean, I don't understand that attitude, her attitude that you only talk to people that you like, unless she means people who are willing to talk to you and not people who are like trying to make you believe as they do. But then I talk to missionaries, and I remember months ago, no, maybe a year or so ago, someone put up little flyers on telephone poles, call this number to get a free Bible. I'm like, all right, I like free stuff. And I like the Bible. And I also knew that there was probably a sales pitch that would come with it, which was fine because I'm their worst nightmare, I'm a PhD in theology, so study of God, so I'm their worst nightmare. And I just thought it would be fun. It would be interesting. Who would it be? And I thought it might be the Mormons. I thought it might be. It could have been someone. It could have been, I don't know, maybe a local Baptist church, Christian, some evangelical Christian church. Who knows? So it was a surprise, and it turned out to be the Mormons. Two very young guys. I forget where they were from. Not from New Jersey. I think out west somewhere. But anyways, very young guys, very nice guys. But they were there to give me their testimony about why they were Mormons and why I should want to become one. And that was perfectly okay with me. I knew that was their job, and that's okay. And I talked to them about what I believed, and that was fine. And told them, because I know that their lifestyle is not a great one. I mean, they're basically paying their own way to be missionaries. So it's not like it's easy for them. They're dedicating 2 years of their lives to their religion, so they must believe it. I give them total credit for that, because I'm a Catholic. How many young Catholic men would spend 2 years going to like Finland to preach Catholicism door to door? How many do you know do that? If you're Catholic, none that I know of, at least not from my church. So, and not me. So I respect that. And I told them, if you want to talk, you have my phone number. Here's my phone number. We can talk. That's it. Anything else? Any other comments or? Yeah.
Going back to the said about I want to talk about it with intellectual race. Talking about that, religion is a very heartfelt topic for her, you can say. So she probably meant, I'm not agreeing with her anything, but
Okay.
I feel like she probably meant people who share the same level of interest about the topic, not people who are just going to kind of disregard everything you have to say.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. That's a good point. Yeah, someone who's just not interested, like, yeah.
I also agree with that. I think religion can be like a very personal topic to you. So like, because if you're talking about what religion might be to you, it's kind of like you're sharing personal stories with someone. So maybe you should only have those conversations like versus a total stranger.
Yeah. Because I guess those conversations can go badly very quickly, especially if she revealed that she's a lesbian woman, which is, I'm not saying anything about it. I'm just saying that some people in some religions, they have issues with that, and she even mentioned that. So she's talking to this woman, and she knows that she says, she didn't really say what she thinks the Roman Catholic Church thinks about being a lesbian, but okay, but I guess it's something negative. I don't know if she said they even discussed that at all. So is it something, did she avoid it? I mean, because there are questions in religion or discussions in religion that can go south, can go badly if I don't know, if you go too far, if you tell too much what you think. Maybe. It's hard. Maybe that's why people don't want to talk about it so much, because if you like reveal like, hey, I don't know what her name was, but hey, let me tell you what I think about homosexuality. And it's not maybe what she wanted to hear, because it could happen. There are people who don't necessarily believe in that. People believe a lot of different things, or let me tell you what's wrong with this country. Can be difficult. One thing I really did, I'm sorry, did anyone else have any comment or? No? Yeah.
I mean, I can see what you mean there, but like, if I don't know, sort of like, I personally have had a lot of friends from a lot of different religions. I have like Catholic friends, I have atheist friends, I even have one friend who claims to be a Satanist,
Oh,
who's a
interesting.
cool guy. I feel like if people have that kind of conversation of like, well, I believe this, and you are a Satanist somehow, I feel like if we were to have that conversation, it would be kind of awkward, because I would just be like, yeah, I don't know what you're on about.
But I guess with what she was kind of talking about, walking dogs with her friend, maybe it could be like treating the person as just a friend, like just listening. Yeah, I might not completely understand what you're talking about or understand why you would be a Satanist. What that. But I guess my first question, I'm just talking for me. My first question, because I would find that fascinating, and I would say, what do you mean you're a Satanist? Because I do know that there are different kinds of Satanists. There are Satanists who do believe in a real evil, the devil, and they do worship. But there are other Satanists who are basically atheists, and they consider Satanism more as a rejection of Christianity. So I'd be like, tell me what's going on here. What do you think? What's your view of the world? I only say this because, well, this was back in the 90s, which tells me how old I am. But remember when they used to have, well, maybe not so much, but they had what were called chat rooms and like news groups and stuff. So you had like the recovering Catholic group, or you had like, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer group, and you had the Satanist group. And I remember, it was late one night, and I was like, let's see what the Satanists are up to. So I went in there, and then the guy had this post, I don't know who it was, but it was the 10 Commandments of Satanism. When there's this long post of all the do's and don'ts if you're a Satanist, like stuff like, you can invite people, into your home, but if they annoy you or make you angry, you can destroy them. You can basically kick them out. So it's just little do's and don'ts. Don't force yourself on someone else sexually if non-consent. So, okay, stuff like that. And never harm children, stuff like that. All right, fine. Tell the truth. Which some of these things didn't make sense to me if I were a Satanist, because the devil's like the father of lies, and why should I treat someone kindly, even a child, why is a child the cutoff, for harming someone if they do harm to you, which was part of the rules, that you could say spells to harm people. And yeah, the response I got from and I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was being, I joked around a little bit, but I was kind of serious, I was interested. Now, the response from the Satanist was, shall we say, as you would expect of a Satanist. It was not polite, but anyway, there's a back and forth, but I was interested. I did the same thing with the Mormon news groups and chat rooms, and I'm interested, that's how I learned. It's how you learn, you talk to people. And one of the issues, of course, nowadays is that people really don't know their religions. even if someone you say Islam, but someone could say, well, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Muslima, but they don't really practice, so if you try to talk to them, they might not know. Catholics, I mean, try talking about Christianity to Catholics. And I'm not saying, I am a Catholic, so I'm not, I'm not trying to be like boo Catholics, but try to talk to a priest about the Bible. You're pumping a dry well. You know what I'm saying? It's hard. Or a lot of, so I mean, I don't know if their conversation had turned to like, okay, so tell me what the Catholic Church believes about lesbianism. If her friend would have had anything to say, she might not have known. Well, anyways, okay, so there that is. Oops. Oh, whoops, whoopsie doodle. Oh, that's the nature. Okay, fine. So that's another point. One last point I wanted to make about something she said was that religion is more feeling than belief, and that is something that you also find in the 1800s with some of the thinkers. That's a guy named Schleiermacher. You'll hear this, Friedrich Schleiermacher, who defined religion basically as feeling. It was how you felt. And she says, well, religion is not about belief, it's about feelings. Well, she kind of undercuts herself later when she says, hey, lesbian, Roman Catholic Church, ooh, well, that's beliefs. Obviously, she's trying to say that the Roman Catholic Church has some beliefs about her being a lesbian that are not ones she agrees with. She talked also earlier in the talk about people going to a temple and they take their shoes off to go up the stairs into the Buddhist temple. They get food, or they listen to chants, to singing on the speakers. Well, why are they doing those things? They're doing them because, for me, they show a belief. There's a belief behind that. You just don't. I mean, someone could just start walking up the stairs in their shoes, and someone, don't do that, take your shoes off. Well, why? They're just shoes. God bless you. They're just something on my foot to keep me from walking on the stones and on the pavement, so I don't hurt my feet. Your feeling might be that you're not being disrespectful, but you might learn the belief that no, shoes mean dirty, mean every day. They're profane. And you don't take the profane into the sacred space, into the temple. Okay, so you remove the shoes and then you walk barefoot. That's a belief, that's not a feeling. So I disagree with her on that religion is mainly about feeling. Feeling's a part of it, but people don't do things, people can do things and be like, hey, my feeling is I'm not doing anything wrong, so why do I have to take off my shoes? But once you learn the belief, you realize, oh, wait a second, sign of respect. Okay? So I didn't necessarily agree with her on that. Okay, yes, it's going on 8 o'clock. So I will see you next week. Good to see you all. Remember, there's a quiz tomorrow. The quiz will be available tomorrow. And I'll see you next week. October already. Oh, and there you go, my friend.